The gavel slammed, a thunderclap in the suffocating silence of the courtroom, and 17-year-old Malik Jackson felt his heart lurch. He stood alone, wrists cuffed, the cold metal biting into his skin as the judge's voice sliced through the air. Guilty. The word wasn't just a verdict, it was a blade, cutting through every hope he'd clung to since the nightmare began. Malik's eyes darted to the crowd, a sea of faces blurred by his rising panic. Some glared with contempt, others whispered, their words venomous. He was a black kid from Oakland, accused of a crime he didn't commit, and now the system was swallowing him whole. The charge? Armed robbery at a local convenience store. The evidence? A grainy security video and a witness who swore it was Malik, despite never seeing his face clearly. The truth? Malik had been home, studying for his chemistry exam, when the crime occurred. But in this courtroom, truth felt like a ghost present, but ignored. The judge, Harold Grayson, leaned forward, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His voice dripped with authority. Young man, your actions have consequences. This court will not tolerate such brazen criminality. Malik's stomach twisted. He wanted to scream that he was innocent, that the real thief was still out there. But his public defender, a tired man with a sagging suit, had already warned him, "Don't speak. It'll make things worse." Worse? How could it get worse than this? The courtroom was a pressure cooker, every whisper and shuffle amplifying the tension. Malik's mother, Aisha, sat in the front row, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled. She hadn't spoken since the trial began, her eyes locked on her son, as if her gaze could shield him from the world's cruelty. Beside her, a few supporters from their church murmured prayers, but their hope felt fragile against the weight of Grayson's bias. The judge had a reputation. Whispers of unfair rulings against minorities had dogged him for years. To Malik, he wasn't just a judge. He was a wall, unyielding and impenetrable. Grayson continued, his tone sharp. The evidence is overwhelming. The witness testimony, the video footage, it all points to you, Mr. Jackson. Malik's jaw clenched. The video showed a hooded figure, unidentifiable, yet somehow it was enough to damn him. The witness, a nervous clerk, had pointed at Malik in a lineup, pressured by police who needed a quick arrest. Malik knew the game. He'd grown up hearing stories of kids like him, black, poor, expendable, caught in the system's jaws. But knowing didn't dull the pain of living it. His public defender, Mr. Larson, stood to object, his voice thin. Your Honor, the evidence is circumstantial at best. My client has an alibi, corroborated by his family, and the video lacks clarity. Grayson's eyes narrowed, dismissing Larson with a wave. I've heard enough. This court will not be swayed by excuses. The crowd stirred, some nodding in approval, others muttering in outrage. Aisha's breath hitched, audible even from where Malik stood. Malik's mind raced. He was a straight-A student, captain of the debate team with dreams of becoming a lawyer. He'd worked summers at a community center, teaching younger kids to read. None of that mattered now. To Grayson, he was just another statistic, a name on a docket to be processed and discarded. The unfairness burned, a fire in his chest that threatened to consume him. He wanted to fight, to shout, but fear kept his lips sealed. Fear of what came next, of prison, of a future stolen before it began. Then, a memory sparked. His father. Malik's dad wasn't just any manha, was Eric Jackson, the U.S. Attorney General, a figure who commanded respect in the highest halls of power. But Eric was in Washington, D.C., consumed by his work, and Malik hadn't wanted to drag him into this. He'd thought he could handle it, that the truth would be enough. He'd been wrong. Your Honor, Malik said, his voice trembling but clear, breaking the courtroom's rhythm. Grayson's head snapped up, irritation flashing across his face. I'd like to make a phone call. The judge scoffed. This isn't the time for games, son. But Malik stood taller, his fear giving way to defiance. It's my right. One call. The room buzzed. Larson hesitated, then nodded, sensing a shift. Grayson's lips tightened, but he couldn't deny the request without risking an appeal. Very well, he snapped. Make it quick. A bailiff handed Malik a phone, and every eye followed his trembling fingers as he dialed. The line rang once, twice, then a deep, familiar voice answered. Malik? What's wrong? Dad, Malik said, his voice cracking. I need you. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Aisha's eyes widened, hope flickering in them for the first time. The crowd murmured, confusion rippling through the pews. Grayson leaned back, his confidence wavering, though he masked it with a scowl. Malik's call wasn't just a lifeline, it was a grenade, and the pin was already pulled. Eric Jackson's voice carried a weight that transcended distance. Tell me everything, he said. Malik recounted the trial in halting words, the flimsy evidence, the biased judge, the witness who couldn't be sure. Eric listened, his silence more powerful than any outburst. When Malik finished, Eric's tone was steel. Put the bailiff on. Malik handed the phone to the bailiff, who listened for a moment before his face paled. He passed the phone to Grayson, who took it with a sneer. This is highly irregular, the judge began, but his words faltered as Eric spoke. Though no one else could hear, Grayson's expression shifted first to annoyance, then to something closer to fear. He hung up, his hand lingering on the receiver. Court is recessed, Grayson announced abruptly, his voice clipped. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. The gavel fell, weaker this time, and the room erupted in whispers. Malik's heart pounded. He didn't know what his father had said, but he knew one thing. The game had changed. As the bailiff led him to a holding room, Malik caught his mother's eye. She mouthed, I love you, and he nodded, drawing strength from her. The hour crawled by, each minute heavy with uncertainty. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was electric. Grayson returned, his face a mask of forced composure. But before he could speak, the courtroom doors swung open. Eric Jackson strode in, his presence commanding the room. At 52, he was tall, broad-shouldered, with a gaze that could silence a storm. His tailored suit and measured steps spoke of authority, but his eyes locked on Malik burned with a father's love and fury. The crowd fell silent, sensing the shift in power. Aisha rose, tears streaming down her face, as Eric took her hand briefly before turning to the bench. Your Honor, Eric said, his voice calm but unyielding. I understand my son is on trial for a crime he did not commit. I'd like to address the court. Grayson's jaw tightened, but he nodded. To deny the U.S. Attorney General would be career suicide. Eric faced the room, his words deliberate. Malik Jackson is not a criminal. He's a scholar, a leader, a son who makes his family proud. The evidence against him is flimsy at best, and this court's rush to judgment raises serious questions about its impartiality. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I've already contacted the Department of Justice. An investigation into this case and this courtroom begins today. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grayson's face reddened, but he said nothing. Eric continued, turning to the prosecutor. You have one chance to review your evidence and withdraw these charges. If you don't, I'll ensure every aspect of this case is scrutinized under a microscope. The prosecutor, a young woman named Claire Evans, shifted uncomfortably, her confidence shaken. Malik watched, his fear giving way to awe. His father wasn't just fighting for him, was dismantling the system's lies, brick by brick. But the battle wasn't over. Grayson cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. Mr. Jackson, this court will not be intimidated. The evidence is garbage? Eric cut in, his voice rising. A blurry video and a coerced witness? You call that justice? He stepped closer to the bench, his presence towering. You've made a career of railroading kids like my son. That ends now. The room was a powder keg. Spectators leaned forward, some nodding in agreement, others frozen in shock. Aisha clutched her necklace, a cross she'd worn since Malik was born, praying silently. Malik felt a surge of hope, but also dread. His father's power could save him, but it could also make him a target. If the charges were dropped, would the world see him as innocenter as the kid who got off because of his dad? Grayson banged his gavel, desperate to restore order. Enough! This court will not tolerate such outbursts. But his voice lacked its earlier bite. Eric's arrival had exposed the cracks in his authority. The judge adjourned the session again, ordering a review of the evidence. As Malik was led away, he locked eyes with his father, who gave him a nod that said, "We're not done." In the holding room, Malik sat alone, his mind racing. He thought of the kids who didn't have a father like his kids, who faced judges like Grayson and never got a second chance. The system wasn't just broken. It was built to break people like him. But for the first time, Malik felt a spark of purpose. If he got out of this, he wouldn't just be a lawyer. He'd be a warrior, fighting for those the system left behind. The next hour brought chaos. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered, their signs demanding justice for Malik. News vans lined the street, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. Eric's involvement had turned a local case into a national story. Inside, Claire Evans pored over the case file, her face pale. The witness, under pressure, had recanted, admitting he wasn't sure it was Malik. The video, when re-examined, showed inconsistencies, a different build, a mismatched shoe. The case was unraveling. When court resumed, Grayson's demeanor had shifted. He avoided Eric's gaze, focusing on his papers. "In light of new information," he said tightly, "the prosecution has moved to dismiss the charges against Malik Jackson." The room exploded, cheers from Aisha and her supporters, grumbles from those who'd already judged Malik guilty. Malik's cuffs were removed, the metal's weight replaced by a flood of relief. He ran to his mother, who enveloped him in a hug, sobbing. Eric joined them, his hand on Malik's shoulder. "You're free," he whispered. But Malik knew freedom wasn't just about walking out of the courtroom. It was about what came next. As they left, Malik glanced at the wooden sign on the wall. Justice or judgment? The question lingered, a challenge to the world he was re-entering. He wasn't just a kid anymore. He was a symbol, a story, a spark. And he'd make sure his voice and the voices of others like him was heard. Malik stepped out of the courthouse into a world that felt both familiar and alien. The Oakland sun was blinding, a stark contrast to the fluorescent haze of the courtroom. Reporters swarmed, their microphones thrusting toward him like spears, their questions a chaotic blur. "Malik, how does it feel to be free? Mr. Jackson, will you sue the city? Is this a victory for justice?" His father, Eric, stood at his side, a shield against the frenzy, while Aisha gripped Malik's hand, her warmth grounding him. He wanted to speak, to tell them the truth, that freedom tasted bittersweet when it came at the cost of proving what should never have been questioned, but Eric raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "My son needs rest," he said, his voice firm. "We'll address this soon." The drive home was quiet, the hum of the car a fragile barrier against the storm outside. Malik stared out the window, watching Oakland streets blur past corner stores, murals, kids playing basketball. This was his home, but it felt different now, like he was seeing it through a cracked lens. The protesters outside the courthouse had chanted his name, holding signs that read, "Justice for Malik" and "End Systemic Racism." But others, across social media and news comment sections, called him a thug who dodged punishment because of his father's power. The divide was stark, and it cut deeper than the cuffs ever had. At home, Aisha cooked Malik's favorite fried chicken and collard greens, but the meal was heavy with unspoken words. Eric broke the silence, his voice softer now. "Malik, I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." Malik shook his head. "You came when it mattered, Dad." But the words didn't erase the ache. He'd faced the system alone at first, and that loneliness lingered. Aisha reached for his hand. "You're stronger than you know," she said. "But this fight isn't over." Malik nodded, his mind already turning to the future. He wasn't just a victim. He was a survivor, and survivors had a responsibility to act. The next morning, Malik woke to a flood of notifications. His story had gone viral, trending on X with hashtags like Malik Jackson and Justice Now. Some posts celebrated his release, calling it a triumph over a corrupt system. Others spewed venom, accusing him of manipulating the truth with his father's influence. One post, with thousands of likes, read, "Another criminal walks free because of connections. Where's the justice for the store clerk?" Malik's stomach churned. The clerk, who'd wrongly identified him, had apologized, but the damage was done. Public opinion was a battlefield, and Malik was caught in the crossfire. Eric had already scheduled a press conference, set for that afternoon at a local community center. Malik dreaded it. He wasn't ready to face the world, to have his pain dissected on live television. But Eric was resolute. "They need to hear your voice, not just mine," he said. "This isn't just about you, it's about every kid who's been where you are." Malik thought of his friends, kids from his neighborhood who'd been arrested for less, their futures derailed by a system that saw them as threats. He agreed, not for himself but for them. The community center was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Reporters, activists, and neighbors filled the room, their faces a mix of hope, anger, and curiosity. A wooden podium stood at the front, a hand-painted sign behind it reading, "Truth over lies." Malik recognized it as the work of his friend Jada, an artist who'd rallied support for him online. The sign's bold letters, scratched into the wood, grounded him as he took the stage. Eric spoke first, his words measured but searing. "My son was targeted not because of evidence, but because of who he is, a young black man in a system that too often assumes guilt. This isn't just Malik's story. It's the story of countless others. We demand accountability, not just for this case, but for every case where justice is denied." The crowd erupted in applause, but Malik noticed a few faces stone cold, arms crossed, unconvinced. When it was Malik's turn, his throat tightened. He gripped the podium, his knuckles pale against the dark wood. "I'm not here to talk about me," he began, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "I'm here for the kids who don't have a dad like mine, who don't get a second chance. I was lucky. Too many aren't." He paused, scanning the room. "I didn't rob that store. I was home, studying, dreaming of a future. But to Judge Grayson, to the police, to the system, I was just another black kid to lock up. That's not justice. That's judgment." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone. Malik continued, his voice rising. "I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for change. For police to stop profiling. For judges to stop assuming. For people to stop looking at kids like me and seeing a threat instead of a person." He thought of the clerk, the blurry video, the witness stand where he'd felt invisible. "I forgive the clerk who pointed at me. He was scared, pressured. But I can't forgive a system that makes it so easy to destroy lives." The applause was deafening, but Malik saw the skeptics, two reporters scribbling, a man in the back shaking his head. He didn't care. He'd spoken his truth, and it felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. As he stepped down, Jada hugged him, whispering, "You did it, Malik." But he knew it wasn't over. Words were just the start. In the days that followed, the fallout was relentless. The Department of Justice launched an investigation into Judge Grayson's court, uncovering a pattern of biased rulings. Grayson resigned quietly, his legacy tarnished. The police department faced scrutiny, with calls for reform growing louder. Malik's case became a rallying cry, sparking protests and debates across the country. On X, the conversation exploded. Some praised Malik as a hero. Others called him a symbol of privilege, his freedom bought by his father's status. The divide mirrored the one Malik had felt in the courtroom. A nation split on what justice meant. Malik returned to school, but it wasn't the same. Classmates stared, some with admiration, others with suspicion. His chemistry teacher, Miss Carter, pulled him aside. "You're not just a student anymore," she said. "You're a voice. Use it wisely." Malik took her words to heart. He started a blog, writing about his experience and the stories of others caught in the system. He called it Justice or Judgment, echoing the sign from the courtroom. The blog gained traction, with comments pouring in, some supportive, others vicious. But Malik read every one, determined to understand the world he was fighting to change. One evening, as he scrolled through X, a post stopped him cold. It was from the store clerk, a man named Tom Ruiz. I was wrong about Malik Jackson. It read, I was scared, and I let the police push me.
I'm sorry.
The post had thousands of retweets, some calling Tom brave, others labeling him a coward. Malik stared at the screen, torn. He wanted to hate Tom, but he remembered his own fear in that courtroom, how it had nearly silenced him. He typed a reply, I forgive you, Tom. Let's make things right together. The response went viral, a small bridge in a divided world. Eric and Aisha watched Malik's transformation with pride and worry. You're taking on a lot, Aisha said one night, her voice soft. You don't have to carry it all. Malik smiled, his eyes tired but resolute. I know, Mom, but I can't stop now. Eric nodded, his hand on Malik's shoulder. You're my son, but you're also your own man. Lead with truth, and you'll never walk alone. Months later, Malik spoke at a rally for criminal justice reform, the crowd stretching across Oakland's city square. The wooden sign from the community center stood behind him, its message unchanged, truth over lies. He shared his story, but also the stories of others' kids like Jamal, who'd spent a year in juvie for a crime he didn't commit. Mothers like Tasha, who'd lost sons to a system that didn't care. This isn't about me, Malik said, his voice carrying over the crowd. It's about us, about building a world where justice isn't a privilege, but a right. The crowd roared, but Malik's eyes caught a few faces skeptical, angry, unconvinced. He knew change wouldn't come easy. Some saw him as a hero, others as a fraud. But he'd learned something in that courtroom. Truth was worth fighting for, even when it hurt. As he stepped down, Jada handed him a new sign she'd painted. Hope over hate. Malik smiled, holding it high. The fight was far from over, but Malik was ready. He'd face the doubters, the haters, the system itself. Because justice wasn't just a word, it was a promise. And he'd keep it, for himself and for those who'd never had a voice. What do you think? Where does justice begin? And how do we bridge the divide between truth and judgment?